Welcome to the Five of Us. We are five outspoken women with close to 150 years of experience as broadcast journalists. We left our jobs on the very same day, and we are dedicated to helping women avoid the many pitfalls common to the workplace. We've heard from hundreds of people recounting tales of woe on the job, and we have done the research. We're putting it all in a book, and we are here to help. I'm Roma Torrey, and along with Kristen Shaughnessy, Janine Ramirez, Vivian Lee, and Amanda Farinacci, we are the Five of Us.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Good to be together still, right? Hi. All right, so we set out to do this podcast because we wanted to delve into issues that we thought many people would face during their career, sort of be like that colleague that's not in the workplace with you, but sort of here either on the radio or wherever you're listening. And this goes across industries. You know, many of the issues it doesn't matter where you work. And so that's what we wanted to do with this podcast. And at some point in your career, you might have to make a decision that's difficult. It might cost you your career. So we wanted to kind of delve into all of that. So now we're about 10 episodes in. We're getting a lot of feedback, which has been great. We're hearing from people around the country, which is really fun. And I just want to go around. Let's talk about general reaction first, and then we can talk about more specific that we're doing. So let's start with you, Rom.
The reaction, at least from my end, has been very positive, honestly. And I mean, granted, the people who are writing to me are mostly people I know, so they're, not just colleagues, they're friends, and I think they hesitate to say anything negative, but they seem very sincere and very earnest. And if there is any criticism, it's basically, and this is kind of interesting, that I've heard almost exclusively from male friends, from men. And we did try to target women specifically, but not exclusively. And I'm hearing from a lot of guys who are saying, ladies, this applies to us too. The episodes that really resonated were, interestingly enough, the bad bosses. I mean, that always gets people. And there was one friend of mine from Pittsburgh, and I have to be honest, I love this guy, but I've never really met him. We've corresponded because he did some work for me. And he was one of the first people to watch the podcast, and he loved it. In fact, I'm going to read to you what he said. He said, "Hey, Roma, I want to write and say I love your podcast. You and your friends put together. It spoke to so many things I've experienced and why I left my teaching career. I was like, wow, there are people out there who actually get this, and I'm not alone in my thinking. Bravo to all of you. Can't wait to see more." And that has been sort of the gist of most of the comments that I've gotten, that people are saying, it's so great that you're speaking what has been the unspoken in my life for so long. People are unhappy with their lives for one reason or another, and it festers, but they don't get it out. In one of the episodes, I said you need an outlet, you need to vent, and we're doing the venting for them. And I think we're allowing people to understand where we're coming from, and it gives them an appreciation of what their situation is, and maybe it's time to make it change.
And they don't feel so alone, right?
No,
and it starts the conversation.
Well, that's the issue, right? Because when you're feeling some of these things at the workplace, whether you're dealing with a toxic boss or a poor performance review out of nowhere, or those kind of situations, like who do you turn to in the office who is going to really understand? You may have a friend or two in the office, but it's also a tricky situation, right? Because these are your colleagues, and you don't know who's going to run up to HR saying, "Oh, guess who's complaining," right? So we're hoping that we become, right, the five of us becomes your place to listen to workplace issues, how to sort through them, what the pitfalls of work life is, and sort of where do you go from there? What are some of the solutions? Your friend in the office that is, not physically there, but you could hear us. And it all goes to our book coming up soon.
Yeah, and let's talk about the book, because that's been a fun project for all of us, and it's really a team effort.
Yeah, interviews, we're speaking to people, asking them these same questions about the topics that we're talking about on the podcast. The feedback that I've gotten from people is that they're so happy to hear from us. We all come together, right? Yeah, we're still here. We still speak. We're still alive. But it's been gratifying, I think, to see. I was surprised by how many people watch. Sometimes you do something and you think it's just going to go out to the universe, and you're like, that. Who knows what's going to happen with that? But I think it's been nice to see. And the other part is, to your point, Roma. So many people seem to feel like we've hit a nerve, because there is a lot of stuff that goes on at work that nobody really talks about, very frankly. And I think it's great that we're creating a space to just kind of lay it out there as it is. And that's really what we want to transform or parlay into a concise book that people can kind of, I think it will probably have to evolve given how workplaces change as times change. But that's the point, is to sort of wrap all this stuff into some kind of, guide or expert book, and then put it out there for people and let them sort of have at it, because we're all going through the same things.
Yeah, and it's not just complaints. We're trying to offer solutions as well, because anybody can complain. That's easy, right? But you really have to, how do you fix it, or how do you change it?
It's funny you say that, because a couple of my friends who are not in media, but they work in communications, said that we need to pull that subject matter in. So that was one criticism, is that it seems to all come from a worker's point of view, but there is an employer's point of view, at least in some ways, and that should be part of the discussion. Generally, I've heard more. I just want more, because this is just scratching the surface. And generally, the fact that we are 5 women who are bringing our more than centuries worth of experience to bear on these matters is really refreshing, because there are a lot of podcasts out there that talk about how to be your best self at work, how to manage up, how to get in good with the boss.
How to play the game.
How to play the game. But there's not a lot of podcasts out there that are talking about, well, we did that. We went those routes, and these are some of the pitfalls we've experienced, and these are some of the remedies that you can go for. The one podcast that really resonated with one of my friends was the pay equity one, and especially what companies try to do to obscure transparency and try not to make pay equity an issue. She actually told me about some horrible things that were said to her from HR officials, who were basically encouraging her to keep new staff separated from older staff and just not let them talk to each other, especially if they were on the same shift. And so I found that really interesting. She was like, there are probably a million stories like that out there that people would love to hear you guys weigh in on. And then another friend said that to the point of trying to get the employer's point of view, there is this idea that HR is trying to get better and that this is the moment, and they finally realize it after decades and decades of the same old template of top-down management, of, I guess, a lack of trust that exists. And they're hoping that a lot of new websites that have popped up are going to be a part of that conversation in making workplaces better. They'd like us to take a look at that.
And they need to change.
They do.
Because the
It's
pandemic-
untenable. You
Right.
can't stay this way.
I also think a lot of times people in HR themselves get it. They understand, but they're also answering to higher ups.
bosses.
So, everybody at the top has to really get on board.
Yeah.
And we understand we're coming from the worker point of view, and there are decisions to be made financially, whatever. But there's a way to do this and make people feel valued.
Another responsive chord that I got was from somebody who was really reacting to the generational divide podcast that we did, talking about, young workers versus the older ones. And he was saying that we let the young people off too easily and we were too kind. And he's older, obviously, and he said that he was freelancing at a particular workplace, and there were younger people freelancing as well. And he said in order to get more money or get more work, they would get either emails or phone calls. And he said he was like always the first one to respond to any call for an assignment. And so one day, after quite a while, there was an opportunity to take a full-time job at this employer, and he got the job. And he said, why did I get the job? Because I was the first one to answer the call. So he said, take that, young people. And he was, using that as a learning opportunity that, yes, young people do seem to have a leg up in many areas, but the old folks who are, tried and true and sticking with it, slow and steady wins the race. And he was saying he learned that lesson. He wanted us to pass that on.
Well, it's also, they say, why do they call it work? Because you're supposed to work,
Yeah.
right? Like you're not supposed to not work when you're at work. Let's talk about where we see this going. And, we have the book, we have the podcast. I mean, just your thoughts in the future. I know we would love to speak to large audiences as well.
Well, I want to piggyback first
Sure.
on what Roma was saying, because that's the feedback I got on that particular, the younger generations, what kind of lessons we could learn from younger generations. And then my friend Yoli says, wait a minute, she lives in Maryland. She was just like, I think one of the other cons of this whole like leaving work and not staying loyal to one company and staying there for a long time, is the younger generation is so focused on the moment and the present that they don't think about the future. And our parents, and even some in our generation, she's my age, are fortunate to have pensions and good solid retirement checks coming in because of the time and the investment they gave to that company.
Right.
She says, not saying it's right or better, but I don't know, folks who are our age or older, who are leaving work at a decent age, 55, 60, 65, some of them are coming home with 3 or 4 checks coming in every month, and the younger generation can't see that far into the future.
Or they're not being offered
They're not
pensions.
being offered either.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
that
don't really
time has
exist in
passed.
401ks, and even
Yeah.
those might go the way
Yeah.
of the.
Right.
Yeah,
So the reaction has been to that, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that moving forward, we're gonna, welcome people's opinions about what they want us to talk about. We're soliciting any, ideas. If I saw somebody this morning who was like, "Oh my God, I have like a great idea for your podcast," and I was
Bring it
like,
on.
"Send me an email, okay?" We'll talk about
And we
it.
have an email address.
Now we have an email address. Yeah.
Way to go, Janine.
Yeah, and I think obviously we are 5 women. We have broadcast and television experience, but we're not only here to talk about broadcast and television. We're not only here to talk about women's issues. We are women. We're going to talk about what we know, but we recognize that this is not meant to be in a vacuum. We're here to talk about work, and it doesn't really matter where you are, where you're doing your work. The issues exist everywhere.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, you were asking, what do we expect for the book? I think initially we were envisioning, and this was your idea, Janine, that we wanted to be, the what to expect when you're expecting. We wanted to be
The resource
serve that
guide,
purpose
yeah.
for what to expect when you're working, and use that as a resource guide, which would be updated every year, and that people would see, who to go, what lawyer to go to if you have a problem, or what resources, what groups, where to get money, that sort of thing. So that's sort of the aim, the ultimate aim.
I also think there's something to be said for still seeing how all this pans out post-pandemic. Like it's almost in our rear view mirror, like hopefully, and it's not going to come back again this winter. But people want to know if they're looking for hybrid or remote-only positions, how do they keep engagement up? Like how do they stay connected? What should they demand from their employer? I think companies are also trying to figure that out. So I kind of see the book morphing as time goes on too, and us being responsible enough to give some good advice for people who are in those work situations where they're not in person all the time.
Yeah.
Right, because it's office politics even when you're not in the office.
Almost especially
How to navigate
just
that.
remote more so. Like if you're out of sight, then you need to do oftentimes more work to try and get in front.
Because there's meetings you don't even know are happening because you can't see them happening.
That's right.
So yeah, that's a very good point, Janine.
And then they also, there was some feedback, maybe we should have some guests, right? We did for our book, we are not talking about our experiences exactly. We're talking to experts and people who have been through situations. We're talking to employment lawyers. We're talking to HR departments about tips for workers. And so having some of those guests come on would be a good idea. As you said, sometimes it's like, well, how about the employer's point of view? Well, maybe we'll have a guest who is an employer who has a different point of view and how to navigate and give some tips. So that's
That would be a fun discussion too.
Yeah,
right? Because I think like it's good to know what every part of the team is doing, even the leadership.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's important. All right, well, this is good. I've enjoyed getting the feedback too, and I'm surprised by how many men are watching or listening, which I would love that. So please continue to do that.
Right.
And we will accept all suggestions. We don't know if we'll follow them, but we'll take all suggestions. And we should just tell you we're now on Amazon, Apple, and Spotify. And if you can rate, only if you like it, we'd appreciate that as well.
Good reviews only.
Yeah. All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to The Five of Us. We want to hear from you with any questions, ideas, or suggestions for future discussions. Just write to us at the email you see here, and we will be eager to help. Talk to you next time.